Hello everyone. To talk about the properties or qualities of nouns, we often compare them, and in order to compare them, we have 3 degrees of comparison in English. They are positive degree, comparative degree, and superlative degree. So today in this video, we will talk about how these degrees or degrees of comparison work and exactly what are the rules to form them. So like I said before, degrees of comparisons are used to talk about or to compare two different qualities of a thing or two different things or two different people, basically two different nouns. Now before we know exactly how degrees of comparison work, let's first look at one word, that is syllable. In order to understand degrees of comparison, we need to know what syllable is. Now a syllable is a single unbroken sound of word. It usually has a single vowel sound and accompanying consonant sounds, of course. So if we take an example, you can say bat, mat or cat. While saying these words, you don't really have to break the sound of the word. You can say it in one go. That's why these are one syllable words. But if I say money or marry or bully, now these are words that are of 2 syllables. But if I say establish, now this is a 3 syllable word. Now let's move on and talk about different degrees of comparison. Like I mentioned before, they are positive degree, comparative degree, and superlative degree. Now in positive degree, you are not really actively comparing two things or two qualities of a thing, but there is still a comparison. The intent is to compare it. For example, when you say that he is strong, it means that he is strong. You are not actively comparing him to other people, but you are saying that he is strong. You are emphasizing one of his qualities. The words that are usually used to talk about or to describe different qualities of a thing, they are usually adverbs or adjectives. That's why you can only form comparatives and superlatives of adjectives or adverbs. Now let's talk about comparative degree. Now comparative adjectives or comparative degree of adjectives, these are used to talk about or describe a person or a thing, or you can basically say a noun in comparison with another noun. For example, when you say something is bigger or someone is faster or someone is slower or taller, basically you are comparing two things and you are attributing one to be taller than someone else or faster than someone else. This is how comparative degree works. You compare two things or two people, basically two nouns, and compare one quality of those. Usually these have a sentence structure, and that is, first it is a noun which acts as a subject, of course, then the helping verb or the verb, and then the comparative adjectives along with than, followed by a noun which is of course acting as an object here. But of course you can miss than and the other noun, the one that is acting as an object, in case it is something that is obvious. For example, let's say you are talking about two houses and you can say that this one's bigger. Now you don't have to say this one is bigger than that one. It actually is very obvious now that you are talking about the two houses. Also, you can use more and less in case of comparative adjectives, which is something we will learn later in this video. Now let's learn a little bit about superlative adjectives. Now superlative adjectives are used to describe a noun in comparison with two or more nouns. So when you are comparing something to something else, it's usually comparison, it's usually a comparative adjective. But when you are talking about one thing, when you are describing one noun in comparison with two or more nouns, basically a group of nouns, then you can use superlative adjective. If you take examples, you can say biggest or smallest or tallest or shortest. Basically you are referring to one noun, that is one person or one thing, in comparison with everyone else in that group. Anyway, superlative adjectives also follow a structure, a sentence structure. That is, first a noun, which is of course used as a subject, then the helping verb, then the word the, after that the superlative adjective, and then the noun, which is of course used as an object. But of course, when you're talking about something obvious, you can omit that object, the last noun, you can omit that. Also, there are words like most and least that usually are used with superlative adjectives, but we will talk about that later in this video. Okay, so now that we are familiar with what comparatives and superlatives are, So now let's learn how to form comparatives and superlatives. It usually depends on the number of syllables present in the word. Usually the word is, like I said before, an adjective or an adverb. So it usually depends on how many syllables that word has. The first rule of thumb is, if the word has only one syllable, you can easily add er to it to form a comparative and add est at the end to form a superlative. For example, fast, faster, fastest, bold, bolder and boldest, or calm, calmer and calmest, or short, shorter, shortest. Now if you look at the positive degree of these words, you can easily see that these contain only one syllable, and that's why it's so easy to form these comparatives and superlatives by simply adding er and est at the end. Now if the positive degree of the word, that is the basic form of the word, has e at the end, you don't have to add another e. You can simply add r to form a comparative and st to form a superlative. For example, when something is nice, you can say it's nicer, nicest, or when something is large, you can say larger, largest. You can also use brave, braver and bravest. Now there is another rule that states that if the basic form of the word has a consonant, a vowel and another consonant at the end, and particularly in that order, you can always double the consonant at the end and form the comparatives and superlatives. For example, for fat, you can say the comparatives and superlatives will be fatter and fattest. You need to double T here. The same goes for thin, that will be thinner and thinnest, or hot, which can be hotter and hottest, or sad, which will be sadder and saddest. Now these are pretty easy to remember rules, and there is nothing much you didn't know already. Now I'm just trying to put it all in simple words so it's easier for you to remember. Now let's talk about a few two-syllable words. If you have y at the end of a two-syllable word, which is the basic form of a word, then you can change that y into I and then add er and est to form comparatives and superlatives. For example, if you say busy, now it has y at the end, so you simply write busier and busiest. The same goes for silly, that is sillier and silliest, or happy, happier and happiest. Now there are certainly some two-syllable words that you can turn into comparatives and superlatives by adding er and est at the end. It's that simple. But most time there are words, usually two or more syllable words, that you have to add more and most in order to turn them into comparatives and superlatives. For example, when you say something is beautiful, the comparatives and superlatives of these words are more beautiful and most beautiful. Now why don't we take example sentences this time? For example, careful. Now if I take an example sentence, you can say, I have to be more careful this time. I have to be more careful this time. Or let's say exciting. It was the most exciting discovery of her life. It was the most exciting discovery of her life. Or you can say expensive. Now this is another word with two or more syllables. You can form a sentence by saying, she found Delhi to be more expensive than her own city. She found Delhi to be more expensive than her own city. Or let's say important. You can say, our credibility is more important to us than money. Our credibility is more important to us than money. Or let's take one last word, that will be nervous, let's say. For example, the more time passed, the more nervous she became. The more time passed, the more nervous she became. Now there are certain adjectives or certain words that can be used with both er, est and more and most in order to turn these into comparatives and superlatives. So these words are simple, narrow, quiet, friendly, gentle and clever. Now I'm sure there are more words like these, but these are the only ones I could find. So there you go. If you find these with er and est or with more and most, remember that these are not wrong. These can be used with both of these cases. There are also some other words that are considered irregular, because these have irregular comparatives and superlatives, because these do not really follow the classic or the simple rules that we have. These have totally different comparatives and superlatives. For example, these words are good, better, best, bad, worse and worst, little, less, least. For much and many, for both, you can say more and most. For far, in context with distance, you can say farther and farthest. But for far, in context with extent, you can say further and furthest. So these are a few irregular words, irregular adjectives, because these have irregular comparatives and superlatives. So yeah, that's it for today, guys. In this video we talked about different degrees of comparison in English, and we also looked at a few rules to help you know how to form these comparatives and superlatives. So if you found this video useful, then give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel. That would literally mean a lot. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.